to another episode of Locked On Phillies, and I got to ask an interesting question for our mailbag segment. Tell me why the Phillies can win the World Series. Well, I'm going to do just that in today's episode.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm Connor Thomas, your host. Thank you so much for joining us today. We come to you as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You may know me from some of my other work in the sports talk space. I've been on air over at 97.5 The Fanatic doing sports talk radio for 5 years now here in Philadelphia. I've been a credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member for 3 seasons, and this is now my 4th year as the host of Locked On Phillies. Please make sure if you're listening to this in podcast form, you're rating and reviewing. We're available wherever you get your podcasts. If you're checking us out on the YouTube or going to check us out on the YouTube, go to Locked On Phillies, the channel, and hit the subscribe button. It's free. It's easy. It'll get you notifications when new episodes are posted. It's also a great way to really help me out. So it's a win-win for everybody involved. Appreciate everyone who's done that already and everyone who's going to. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Go ahead and check out Locked On Eagles. Of course, support the Philadelphia Eagles, support the Birds. I'm so excited to watch them play in the Super Bowl. I'm also really, really happy with all the content that Locked On Eagles is putting out. So go ahead and check them out. Give them some love when you get done with this episode of Locked On Phillies. But speaking of championships and championship contention, we know what the goal for the Philadelphia Phillies is. It is a World Series, like it has been since that 2022 run happened. And funny thing is, the season that they got closest to winning the World Series was the last season where their goal was not really to win the World Series. Now everyone's goal is to win the World Series. You know what I mean, right? Like everyone's trying to win baseball games, but that was like the proof of concept year, and then they haven't gotten as close as they got that year. So kind of a weird time frame for the Philadelphia Phillies franchise as far as where they're at in championship contention. But we do our mailbag questions. I didn't have an episode yesterday, but our first episode of the week today. So Mailbag Tuesday is here, and I got a great question from Sean Fitzpatrick, who checks in on a bunch of stuff that we do here on Locked On Phillies. Appreciate Sean. We've got other questions we'll get to in the second segment. We're also going to talk in the final segment about Truck Day. The Phillies have started shipping stuff down to Clearwater because spring training is right around the corner. But Sean Fitzpatrick asks, Connor, what is your level of optimism for this team in 2025? Give me a reason or reasons to think that this club can get to and actually win the World Series, because he says, honestly, I can't envision it. And you know what, Sean, this is something I've been coming to terms with myself. If you're like Sean out there, or if you're like me, like that's understandable. This team does not have the clearest path to the World Series. Let's lay out what they're up against real quick. You are up against the modern-day juggernaut baseball team in the Los Angeles Dodgers. In your league, you're going to have to knock them off or hope somebody else does for you to even win the pennant. In your division, before you even get to that point, you now have the Juan Soto-led Mets, who beat you in the postseason last year, the Atlanta Braves, who are going to come back with a vengeance after being unhealthy last year, but still a talented roster. They're going to be ticked off and want to compete for a division they basically owned for the past decade. The Phillies won it last year, so you now have the target on your back. The National League is the more talented league. I would believe, like if you ask me right now, I think the National League is the tougher side of the bracket. And the NL East could very well be the toughest division in the National League. It probably is. And the Phillies have to contend with both of those things just to get in playoff positioning, to then have to knock out those teams in the biggest spots. And then if you get all of that done, you have to go to the World Series and probably play the Yankees again, or the young upstart Orioles who are going to have all-stars all over the place, or, I don't know, the Cleveland Guardians who play the most annoying brand of baseball, or the young Kansas City Royals with Bobby Witt, who's a bona fide superstar. There's some really good teams in baseball right now. Why can the Philadelphia Phillies win the World Series? It's a great question, and it's one that if you have reservations about, I completely understand because of all the factors I just laid out there. Here's what I'll say. This would be my greatest argument in the moment for why the Philadelphia Phillies can win the World Series this year. The first thing we've got to talk about is the offense, because that is everybody's sticking point with this team. Oh, they're chokers. Oh, they aren't selective enough at the plate. Oh, they don't have the ability to put together big at bats when it matters. Well, that's not necessarily true. They have a couple of guys who have been clutch like crazy the past couple of years. Nick Castellanos has been. He was amazing in the series against the Mets. He was awesome in the series, in the divisional series against the Braves 2 years ago. Bryce Harper is always going to be one of the most clutch athletes on the face of the planet, not just in the sport of baseball. So you have two big-time hitters. Kyle Schwarber has been big-time in the postseason at points for this team. It feels like Kyle Schwarber is a leadoff home run to start a series at home guy, and then you kind of go, where'd he go? But the thing with Kyle Schwarber is he's been a World Series champion before. He was on that 2016 curse-ending Cubs team. The guy who is the clubhouse leader of this team, because leadership means a lot, and Kyle Schwarber's that guy, has been a guy on a World Series winning team. So you know they can create the culture. Anyone who looks at the manager and says, well, they can't win with Rob Thompson, you're overvaluing how much a manager means on a professional baseball team. They matter. Absolutely, Rob Thompson matters, and he's going to make important decisions. But at the end of the day, if your guys aren't hitting, it doesn't care. I could manage the damn team. Like, they need to put together better at bats. So what are you looking at? Are you looking at a year where Alec Boehm and Bryson Stott, they have these come back down to earth years? Well, Bryson Stott had a rough year, but Alec Boehm was an all-star starter. Now you get into a situation where they were going to trade me this offseason. Now I'm in my head, all of this stuff. Or are you going to get motivated? The Philadelphia Phillies have reached a crossroads, right? This is the do or die year. So a lot of my argument is not going to be on talent level of the team. We know they're talented. If you don't think Bryce Harper is good enough to win a World Series, you're crazy. If you don't think Nick Castellanos or Kyle Schwarber or Trey Turner, who has one, you don't think those guys are good enough to win the World Series, you're crazy. If you don't think JT Realmuto is good enough and maybe a little bit of a lighter workload to win a World Series, you're nuts. Like, they had 3 all-star starters in the infield last year. They're a very, very talented baseball team. But how it all comes together is key, and part of that is the mentality of the team. So that's the thing we're going to talk about. The approach is going to need to be worked on. They're going to need to be more selective. I think that you're going to see guys like Bryson Stott and resurging JT Realmuto and Trey Turner settling in for his 3rd year in Philadelphia lead that charge of, hey, let's put the bat on the ball a little bit more. Alec Boehm as well. But you might say, Connor, you just talked about Alec Boehm and he almost got traded. How is that guy mentally going to come back? Well, this is where the Phillies are at a fork in the road. Schwarber's in the final year of his deal. Realmuto's in the final year of his deal. Castellanos is in the second to last year of his deal, meaning he is a trade risk next year for the Philadelphia Phillies. Trade risk from his own perspective if he wants to stay here. So those guys could all be gone. We had an episode about that. They don't want to leave this city without giving a championship to Philadelphia. They're motivated. Guys like Alec Boehm, hey, they wanted to trade me. Doesn't seem like I'm getting moved. Listen, I'm here. If they want to trade me, I want to up my trade value. If I want to stay here, well, I better damn well prove to this franchise and this fan base that I'm going to zone in. I'm going to stop moping. I'm going to take care of my business in the postseason. Alec Boehm has a reason. His career is either going to go, this is a perennial all-star, or this is a guy with talent that doesn't have the mental makeup. Bryson Stott is at a point where he's got to become the hitter that we believe him to be. Now, none of these are like, oh, well, a decision is to be made on these players, so they have to produce. I'm just saying, like, another guy is Ranger Suarez, who's heading into a contract year. We're going to talk about the pitching in a second. They have a lot of guys in unique spots in their careers where it's not, well, we'll have next year. It's not, that's all right, but I'll get another big contract. No, they have a lot of guys where it's like, this is our last chance with this group. And it's very hard to envision myself ending up in a more advantageous situation than I'm in right now. So motivation is everything for the Philadelphia Phillies on top of the talent that they have. Pitching-wise, this is the ultimate part of the equation, though. And I know I started with hitting because that's where people worry more, but pitching is the bread and butter of this team. The bullpen, I think, is talented. Could they get more talented? Yes. Do I worry a little bit about them compared to last year's bullpen? I do, because last year's bullpen was so good. We're going to take a deeper dive when you get deeper into spring training, because I still think there could be a move coming in the pen. As is right now, they're above average. They're not elite. I'll see if they become elite over the course of the season. But the starting rotation could be the best in baseball. Zach Wheeler, MLB Network, had him as the #1 pitcher on the planet. Aaron Nola got a long-term extension. He doesn't have anything to worry about anymore. He is a top level pitcher. Ranger Suarez in a contract year, has all the motivation in the world to get the biggest paycheck of his life. He's in for a monster year. Book it. Christopher Sanchez had his coming out party in 2024. He's due for a year now that he's under a long-term contract to kind of settle in and say, okay, that was the setup. Here's what I can really do now that I'm confident in my role with this team. And Jesus Luzardo, he gets an opportunity to come here from Miami, where he spent a couple years just wasting away on a team that couldn't win. He's a very talented pitcher and a guy that's in the prime of his career. And he's not coming here to have like this long-term deal where he's locked down for 7 years. No, he's also trying to prove that in the right environment, he can be a high level pitcher. Oh, and by the way, Andrew Painter might break in. This starting rotation is poised to be one of, if not the best in baseball. I will take them up against anybody. That includes the Los Angeles Dodgers. I think this staff is really talented. So if I was going to tell you how the Phillies win the World Series, it boils down to you very well could have the best rotation in baseball. You're going to have to outpitch everybody, probably including the Los Angeles Dodgers. Pitching is what wins. It's not necessarily offense. The tough thing is the Dodgers are going to have Shohei for a long time. So when he's able to pitch again, that's tough to contend with. The motivation of the position players, right? You're looking at a situation where everything's going to change for some of these guys on this roster after the 2025 season concludes. There is something about let's get the boys together for one last ride type of thing that does play in a clubhouse. Maybe that is the focus that they need that they haven't had in past years. I'm grasping at straws for winning the World Series, but part of the reason why is the margin for error is so slim. Like you have to start talking about the intangibles when you look at a team like the Dodgers. And you also look at a team like the Phillies that have been incredibly talented but haven't gotten over the hump. And I do think that you're going to see a situation where the guys that need to bat a little bit more consistently as far as average is concerned, which I would term as Stott, Turner, Realmuto. Well, Stott's kind of in the make or break year of his career. Realmuto should have a reduced workload that should up his ability offensively. And Trey Turner is in his third year and should be fully settled in Philadelphia. That's why I think the Philadelphia Phillies can win the World Series, because you may hit a perfect storm of we got to get this done this year, and a motivated team is a dangerous team. So great question there from Sean Fitzpatrick. People may not be happy with that response. I wish I could tell you they're the best team in baseball. They're just more talented. They have a great approach all the time. The manager pushes all the right buttons. I wish I could tell you they're just the perfect baseball team. But you don't need a perfect baseball team to win the World Series. You just need the best one or the hottest one. And there's no reason that can't be the Philadelphia Phillies. Well, no reason outside of Los Angeles that can't be the Philadelphia Phillies in 2025. Coming up next, we're going to get into our other mailbag questions. Got some good ones. One about spring training, which is going to be a heavy focus in today's episode, and one about the bullpen center field, kind of a hybrid question. So we'll get into that coming up as we continue today's episode of Locked On Phillies. But first, let's talk about FanDuel. You know what's coming up. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game. Two teams, Birds, KC, endless possibilities. I think I can actually say Eagles, Chiefs in this read because they're the official partner of Super Bowl 59, and that's FanDuel. There's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss. Friday's episode, I will tell you my coin toss pick. I've hit 9 of the last 10 years. I'm telling you, I'm probably going to nail this one. It's a coin toss, so don't put the mortgage on it, but I feel good about it. Live betting all game long means you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. You got to go check it out. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and automatically win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, like I was saying. And if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. All right, so a couple questions here for our Mailbag Now Tuesday segment that I want to get through. And again, appreciate the question from Sean Fitzpatrick that jumped off the episode today, set up that whole first segment. We've got questions from Ed and questions from Mitch. I'm going to start with Mitch because it's a more baseball-related question. But Mitch Bernstein on X or Twitter or whatever people call it, he went ahead and asked who is going to close. And then he also asked, do you think the platoon in center field with Marsh and Rojas will work? I'll tackle the closer question first because I'm just going to go the sequential order of how he asked it. Who's going to close for the Philadelphia Phillies is still unclear at the time being. I gave some options when we did an evaluation of the bullpen and everything where the team was at. The guys that I think are capable of closing are going to be Matt Strahm, Jordan Romano, Orion Kerkering, and Jose Alvarado. I think the most likely situation is that Jordan Romano is a closer. The other thing you got to remember, right? You got to look at the history, which will tell you what a manager thinks about a player's future. What does that mean? It sounds like I'm reading a fortune cookie. No, here's what I mean by that, right? The Philadelphia Phillies acquired Carlos Estevez at the deadline last year. He was immediately put into a role as the guy who would get save opportunities for this team. You know what that says to me? Rob Thompson did not believe that he had a clear bona fide closer on this roster because prior to Estevez coming here, they didn't really have a guy that was handling the closing responsibilities. Hoffman would get some chances, Strahm would get some chances, Alvarado would get some chances, but it was never like, Jeff Hoffman, you're our closer, go take the ball in the ninth inning. There were stretches when guys were hot, but when you look at your roster and you say, well, I don't really have this guy, and then you bring in someone else and you immediately put them in the role, that doesn't mean that you're looking at it and saying, well, I don't like having a set closer. It's I don't believe any of these guys are set closers. So to me, that bumps down the percentage chance of anyone who was on the roster last year. So Kerkering, Strahm, Alvarado, all on the roster last year, all did not become the closer of that team, even though there were opportunities. Jordan Romano has been a closer in the past. They acquire him in free agency. He was a closer with the Blue Jays. He's a multi-time All-Star. He's a guy that, though he had injury issues, would probably seem to make sense as the front runner for the closer role for the Philadelphia Phillies in 2025. So that would be my best bet. My second bet would be Orion Kerkering. Honestly, I think he has the makeup. I think he has the focus. I think he definitely has the stuff. Alvarado is a little bit too iffy on the command sometimes. Matt Strahm doesn't really have that like dominant closer stuff. Like a closer just has a feel to him. You know one when you see him, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean throw hard. There are guys that throw 91, 92 that are very good closers. Now, Mariano Rivera threw hard, but it wasn't because of his velocity that he was a great closer. It's because he had the cutter that nobody could hit, and he had a great mental makeup for how to use that pitch and how to attack hitters, and no moment was too big for him. So I'm not just saying like a closer is a guy who comes out and throws gas. Now, a lot of teams do look at it that way, and that's why guys like Mason Miller were closing this past year because they're throwing 103, 104, 105. Joan Duran up in Minnesota, another one of those guys. But I think Kerkering is the second best shot. I think Alvarado is the third because, well, I did just have that talk about velocity. Velocity is important. And then Strahm would probably be the least likely of those four. So I would bet Jordan Romano is going to be the closer for the Phillies. And who knows, the Phillies could sign somebody tomorrow that completely invalidates everything I said. Those are my thoughts in the moment. As far as the center field position is concerned, do I think the platoon in center field with Marsh and Rojas will work? Work to what extent is the fair question. Like, I do think it has a chance to work because I think left field is as set as you've had it since those two guys have been here. You've kind of been piecemealing together center field and left field. Remember, it was Christian Pache for a little bit. You had guys like Weston Wilson and Cal Stevenson and David Dahl and all of these guys rotating through as Marsh and Rojas kind of switch spots in center and left. And now you have a major league caliber starter in right, a major league caliber starter in left, Castellanos in right, Kepler in left, and you look at it and say, okay, we now can just stick these two guys in center field and we're good to go. Or you could say whoever wins the center field spot, the other guy is like a depth role. In the past years, whoever didn't win the center field spot was playing left. You had like a backup playing a starting position, all due respect to Rojas and Marsh. And I think one of them, if not both of them, could have solid years. Like I really do. I have a lot of faith in Brandon Marsh. I know that's crazy for people to hear, but I do. I see the guy and the way he plays baseball, strong defensive player, offensive upside, even though he hasn't really cashed in on it. I'm going to hold out hope on Brandon Marsh. And this may be stupid. I may look back at this in October and say, wow, I can't believe I said Brandon Marsh was in for a good year. But I think he's in for a good year. I think he is the starting center fielder for the Philadelphia Phillies. And I think Rojas is going to become a great depth piece, kind of change of pace guy for this Phillies team. So I do think the rotation in center field is going to work better than last year. They're not going to have like all-star caliber outfielding at that position. I don't think, at least. But I think it'll do enough that we're not talking about it as a, hey, this is a weak spot of the team. I think it'll be a, could we do better here? Probably. Are we doing better than last year? Yes, as a credit to those two players. That would be my prediction. And this last one, a little bit of a fun one here. So those are two questions from Mitch. Thank you very much, Mitch, for checking in. Ed Holinsky asked this final question. He says, what's some good Phillies backer bars in Florida during spring training to go check out? And we're going to talk coming up next. Truck day was yesterday, so the Phillies are shipping stuff down. We're going to talk a lot of spring training from this point forward in the episode and more just kind of the excitement of it being here. But I want to answer this question from Ed because it's a great one. If you haven't been down to Clearwater before, you may think, wow, Florida, Tampa area, it's probably a whole bunch of Buccaneers fans. I don't really know where I'm going to be able to go, that I'm going to be welcome as a Philadelphia sports fan. Philly sports fans, well, we don't really carry the reputation of some of the nicer fan bases in football, baseball, basketball, hockey. I get it. So you want to travel and you want to find bars that would be great for you to hang out in where you could find like-minded sports fans. Here's the good news, right? A little bit of a personal story here. So my dad's family is from Largo, which is right down there in the Tampa, St. Pete, Clearwater area. And he grew up there and he kind of like became an Eagles fan by chance, like as a younger man, because the Phillies played in Clearwater and they were right down the street from where he grew up. So the Phillies have been so ingrained in the culture of Clearwater, as they call it these days, that it almost is like Philadelphia South. There are so many Philadelphians that go move down there when they retire, that take over the area during spring training. There are some great bars down there. Tommy's Tiki Bar is one of the best spots in the entire area for you to go ahead and check out. But as far as like worrying about what bars are Philadelphia backing bars, like I remember I went into, and I got to recall the name of it, but it was a bar in Tampa. And I went there to watch it was the NFL playoffs last year. I just went in randomly and the Bucs were playing the Lions. I walk into the bar and I'm looking on the walls and they got all these jerseys and they got like 3 Flyer shirts up there. I'm like, what is going on here? It's just like, well, so many people from down here have moved down here from Philadelphia. So if you're going down, like it sounds like Ed's going to, or if you're like going to just even pop by Clearwater at any point in the future, don't worry about trying to fit in if you're from Philadelphia. That is a town that is very ingrained with the Philadelphia sports scene because the Phillies have been there for so long. They will be very, very welcoming to you. I've been down there many, many times. I have never walked into a bar where I did not feel like comfortable being a Philadelphia sports fan or anything like that. And chances are you walk in somewhere, like I walked into another bar down there where the dude was from like a town over from me in Jersey. And he was a Philadelphia sports fan. It's just, you're going to find them. Every bar's cool with Phillies fans because it's such a normal thing. And you know that if you have a Philadelphia team that spends any time in your area, fans are going to come. You better get used to the fans because we're going to be loud. We're going to be fun. We are a great fan base, but it's the way that they've accepted us. So don't worry about that at all if you're going down. Best bar, though, obviously, Frenchie's at Baycare Ballpark. You're going to hang out in left field and just crush some beach drinks while you watch the Phillies go yard in spring training. Coming up next, if you're like, oh, why is he talking about spring training? It's February 4th. The Super Bowl hasn't even happened yet. Guys, we're right around the corner. Pitchers and catchers are reporting on the 12th. And yesterday was Truck Day. So I will tell you a little bit about what Truck Day is if you're not familiar, and just a little bit about why this is like one of the greatest times of the year. We will discuss that coming up as we wrap up today's episode of Locked On Phillies. All right. Thanks again to everybody who checked out or responded with mailbag questions. We're going to do that still through spring training. So stay with me on those if you have questions on anything Phillies related, as long as they're relatively Phillies related. I'll be glad to answer them as we go through episodes. Some other good news for you, too, just while we're doing a little bit of housekeeping here before we get to Truck Day. The offseason programming for Locked On MLB channels is over. So we're back to 5 episodes a week starting next week. This week is still 3. And then next week, as we get set for pitchers and catchers reporting, will be 5 episodes a week. Now, I may have to finagle stuff a little bit because, not to jinx anything, knock on wood, but we may be preparing for a parade here in Philadelphia, possibly. I said possibly. I'm not jinxing anything, but in the aftermath of whatever happens in Super Bowl 59, yes, we will be back to full week's worth of episodes. So we're getting ramped up for spring training. So anyone who's just like, just 3 a week, don't worry, we're back to the regular grind starting next week. But it's already kind of started. The Philadelphia Phillies had truck day yesterday. So if you ever wondered how the Philadelphia Phillies get all that equipment down there to Clearwater, there's not just some big baseball warehouse that sits down there in Florida in the Tampa Bay area, and the Phillies just let bats collect dust all season long while they're up here in Philadelphia. And then every spring in early February or mid-February, they go down and they open up the door and they're like, okay, does this stuff still work? Nah, they're a Major League Baseball team. They get new equipment all the time. They have new stuff packed all the time. They have to send a bunch of stuff for the months they're going to spend down there. And what they do is they load up everything from Citizens Bank Park. They put it on these big semis, and they drive them down to Clearwater truck day. That's when the trucks leave, and that signals the unofficial start of spring training. The official start is, of course, pitchers and catchers on February 12th, which, again, it's the 4th. We are 8 days away. We are about a week away from spring training starting. But it's nice to go ahead and just get that notification that, like, look at the trucks outside of Citizens Bank Park, because this is the first moment. This is the first hope springs eternal type of moment for baseball teams, and especially for teams like the Philadelphia Phillies that are competitive. This is an NL East winning baseball team. This is a World Series aspirations baseball team. I started this episode by telling you why the Philadelphia Phillies can win the World Series. Now, I was asked to do so, and if I had to pick what team is going to win the World Series, well, I'm not quite there yet to make my prediction, but we will do that ahead of the season and have a bunch of predictions for the year. But my point is this. You have a lot of stuff to look forward to, and this should be the kicking off point of you starting to get excited for Philadelphia Phillies season. Now, the luster is lost a little bit because of what I was talking about at the start of this segment. The Eagles are playing in the Super Bowl on Sunday. So if you're like, I'm not even thinking about baseball right now, if you're a Philadelphia 4-for-4 fan, I'm focused on Kansas City at the Chiefs and trying to get another Lombardi. I get it. And I'm rooting for the Birds as hard, if not harder, than anybody out there. So don't take this as forget about the Eagles. It's baseball season type of thing. I understand. There's another thing to take care of. But as a team in the Philadelphia Phillies with championship aspirations of their own, this is a nice thing to think about. And for me, it also signals the warmer weather. Did you know that a month from Saturday, it's going to be daylight savings time, pushing the sunset time in Philadelphia area back to like 7 p.m. We're about a month away from that. Like, we are getting close, folks, to being back into spring and actually having the weather break and actually seeing baseball be played down there in spring training and starting to figure out what this team can be and what the platoon's going to be in center field and who the backup catcher is going to be. Like, this is the unofficial start to spring training. Spring training is the official start to the baseball preseason, and it's the precursor to the regular season, which hopefully turns into another postseason. Just think about where we are right now and think that this team, if things go right, will play, if you're a pitcher or catcher, from February 12th to the early part of November. I mean, that's a long stretch that is about to get rolling. And the long journey, you got to think about the start so that you can put in perspective the destination. And truck day is always a good time for that. You might say, this dude's making truck day to be way, way more than what it actually is. It's not about putting 10,000 baseballs and 5,000 quarter zips and sweatshirts and stuff like that and cleats and bats and stuff on a truck and driving them down to Clearwater, Florida. No, it's about, we're here, we're close. Like, we sat through a long off season and snow and weeks of nothing to say and no news about the Philadelphia Phillies. And now we finally get to see this team get ready to at least take the field for practice again. And later on this month of February, we will see them take the field to actually play light level competition and begin their quest for another World Series. I'll just tell you real quick. I got a chance to talk to Charlie Manuel a couple of years back. And I asked him, when was the time that you knew that the Philadelphia Phillies, and this was just us talking, this wasn't on air, so this was no BS from Charlie. Not that he ever does. I was like, when did you know that 2008 team had what it takes to win the World Series? And he said it was when we came back from Colorado in 2007, when we got knocked out of that series. I knew by the way they got on the plane. I knew by the focus they had on what's coming next. And that's the thing. You can find out very, very early if the team is about their business. Well, we're one step closer to finding that out ourselves about the 2025 Phillies. That's all for today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Thank you so much for joining us. Once again, we're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please make sure you're rating and reviewing if you're consuming this in podcast form. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Phillies channel. It'll get you notifications when new episodes are posted. And I will talk to you next time on our next episode of Locked On Phillies.